The G.Skill Ripjaw's KM780 RGB gaming mechanical keyboard with Cherry MX brown switches, and the G.Skill Ripjaw's MX780 RGB laser gaming mouse. They may have long titles, but they're beautiful complements to any gaming PC, hands down. I'll discuss both in this video because they're a part of the same relatively new product line from G.Skill, which, as I'm sure you're aware, has been a leading manufacturer in memory modules since the early 2000s. Anyone who's ever wanted to build a PC has likely heard of G.Skill, but that's probably not the case when it comes to peripherals. Let's see if their reputation precedes them. So let's start with the keyboard first. Of course, it's mechanical, sporting genuine Cherry MX brown switches, although you can choose between red, brown, or blue for this model. More on that later. It's a relatively bulky keyboard, liberal in both its design and posture, measuring just under 52 centimeters in length, thanks to its protruding... what is this, a support beam? At first I thought it was pointless, but in fact it serves as a modular interface between the included palm rest, which you can remove, and the extra key carrying case. Not sure why you'd want that connected, but it's there if you want it. The palm rest, on the other hand, is very welcome. It provides excellent wrist support, a sharp contrast from the other mechanical keyboard I reviewed earlier. You get what you pay for. Build quality? All around excellent. Even the cable is finely and rigidly braided, the same can be said for the mouse. The keypad is covered with brushed metal, the keys themselves are ergonomically contoured, and the fact that G.Skill opted for cherries here is a pleasant surprise. They asked me which key type I'd like to test out, and being that my other keyboard already sports blue switches, albeit not cherries, I decided to go for brown this time. Many of you told me that brown would be a viable replacement for loud, clunky blue switches, and while I am familiar with how they all feel and respond, I do still prefer blue switches for gaming and typing in general. But I of course can't fault G.Skill here, since they offer both MX Blue and MX Red variants for the exact same price as the brown variant here. I am glad they give consumers this kind of flexibility, especially without a financial penalty. But speaking of options, there are two LED variants of this keyboard, the KM780 RGB and the KM780 MX. The only difference is the fact that obviously the RGB model offers RGB switches with plenty of programmable functions, including individual key customization. The MX model only offers red LED backlighting, but you're still able to program individual keys and tinker with unique effects. One thing I do have to harp on G.Skill for, I know you saw this coming, G.Skill, the fact that you're charging a $40 premium solely for RGB support. I'm not even kidding, everything else is exactly the same on paper. You're literally paying $40 for the addition of RGB lighting. Some may still find it worth the bump in price, but I imagine many will see fault with it. Now, apart from the typical keys you'll see on a QWERTY mechanical keyboard, you'll find a series of programmable keys to the far left, a macro key and 3 mode keys for controlling lighting effects, peripheral and brightness keys, media keys, and a volume dial with an active LED display. I'm especially thankful for dedicated media keys. I think that addition is a great one, and the interactive volume dial is a nice touch as well, much better than holding down the function key and repetitively pressing F3 to turn up the volume, something I had to do with the other keyboard. On the back of the KM780 for just a moment, you'll find headphone and microphone ports, a single USB 2.0 port, I ended up plugging the mouse into this one, and a rollover switch. These ports will be especially useful for those with short cabled peripherals. Now on to the MX780. Spec-wise, it's sporting a laser sensor with up to 8200 DPI and 4-zone RGB backlighting. It only weighs 120 grams, fits the hand seamlessly, and glides over practically any surface with ease thanks to its PTFE glide pads. While I'm normally turned off by prominent company logos, the G.Skill logo located front and center, it's not trying to hide itself, actually looks sweet, in my opinion at least, thanks to the RGB backlighting. The mouse as a whole looks a bit like a Transformer's face, see the eyes there, see what I'm talking about? But it isn't something I'm willing to be picky about. Some will like it and others simply will not. There are also LEDs towards the top of the mouse which can be seen through either side, as well as the scrolling wheel. G.Skill also includes interchangeable thumb rests, good for both left and right-handed users. In terms of usability, the MX780 will take some getting used to if this is going to be your first gaming mouse ever. It's super sensitive, super touchy, as McLovin would say, and reacts to even the smallest movements thanks to its high-quality laser sensor. This is typical of most gaming mice. And no, adjusting mouse sensitivity within your OS won't entirely fix this behavior. Gamers love this feeling. It's a bit like owning a high refresh rate monitor, not the same, but you get my point. But I will say that anyone coming from a $20 mouse will definitely notice the difference. Now I saved the software for last because it's a bit of a mess currently, and in my personal opinion requires a complete redesign from the ground up. I'm not joking. Firstly, both the keyboard and mouse, as far as I'm aware, require 2 separate programs for operation. I have no idea who the heck came up with this idea in the first place. Many companies still do this, but I find it unnecessary to have 2 separate programs on my desktop for complementary peripherals. That just doesn't make sense. There should be a button somewhere up top to switch between the two, something for example NZXT does with their CAM software. And on top of that inconvenience, the menus and tabs are a bit cluttered and incoherent. I'm typically not this hardcore critical about software because unlike hardware it can be changed and republished after the fact, but in this case it needs to be completely redone. I have engineering textbooks that are easier to understand than the software is. In contrast to Corsair's utility engine, the Ripjaw's configurator will require a manual for proper operation. I'll give them this though, at least their manual pulls through. It's easy to follow, just very dense. But even with the confusing software taken into consideration, this is still one heck of a keyboard, and this is still one heck of a gaming mouse. So what if you don't play video games? It'll be a joy to type up documents with thanks to the integrated Cherry MX mechanical switches and the palm rest. Price-wise, you're looking at around $170 US on the pricey side, but in direct competition with the identically priced K70 RGB from Corsair. And if you're willing to compromise on RGB, you can bring the price of this one down to $130, in my opinion, a much more reasonable price. You can find links to both the KM780 and the MX780 in this video's description, along with the keyboard's Cherry MX Red and MX Blue counterparts. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, give it a thumbs down if you do feel the complete opposite, or if you hate everything about life. Be sure to click the subscribe button if you haven't already. Stay tuned for, I think next I'm going to review the AK Racing chair that I'm currently sitting in. Very comfortable chair. It's a beautiful chair. It matches pretty much everything else in the studio, so I think I'm going to do that next. This is Science Studio. Thanks for learning with us.